Afghanistan, 2013. Dawn broke over the Hindu Kush Mountains, painting jagged peaks in amber and gold, while the valley below remained shrouded in shadow, a darkness concealing both death and desperation. Captain Marcus Reynolds pressed himself against the cold stone of a half-collapsed wall, his Delta Force units scattered around him in whatever cover they could find. 40 Taliban fighters had them surrounded, closing in from three sides. Their only escape route was cut off by a sheer cliff face. The mission had gone sideways when their intel proved fatally flawed. What was supposed to be a quick extraction of a high-value intelligence asset had turned into an ambush. Reynolds had lost 2 men already, and the rest of his 12-person team was running low on ammunition. "Thunder 6, this is Delta 1, Reynolds whispered urgently into his radio, keeping his voice low despite the panic rising in his chest. "We are pinned down at grid coordinates 379er455. Heavy enemy presence. No extraction point. Request immediate air support." The radio crackled. "Delta 1, this is Thunder 6. No air assets available in your sector. Cloud cover too thick for gunships. Nearest QRF is 20 mics out. Hold position." Reynolds closed his eyes briefly. 20 minutes. They wouldn't last 5. The Taliban were maneuvering closer, using the broken terrain for cover. His team was down to their last few magazines. "Sir," his communications specialist whispered, blood trickling from a gash across his forehead. "We're not getting out of this one, are we?" Before Reynolds could answer, his earpiece crackled again. A new voice, calm, measured, almost detached in its professional precision. "Delta 1, this is Ghost 6. Hold your position. I have eyes on target, preparing to engage." Reynolds frowned. Ghost 6 wasn't a call sign he recognized. And what did they mean by eyes on target? The nearest high ground with a line of sight to their position had to be. He scanned the distant ridgeline, squinting against the rising sun. Nearly 4 kilometers away, a solitary figure lay prone on an outcropping of rocks, so still she might have been part of the mountain itself. Through a specialized Barrett M82A1 scope, Staff Sergeant Emily Wilson monitored her breathing, slowing her heart rate to barely 50 beats per minute. Her spotter, crouched beside her, maintained a steady stream of environmental data. The distance to target, 3,127 meters, well beyond the effective range of any standard sniper rifle. At this distance, bullet drop would exceed 30 meters. The slightest miscalculation would result in a complete miss. Wind speed, variable, 3 to 7 mph shifting east. Temperature differential between her position in the valley, approximately 8 degrees. Humidity, 22%. Barometric pressure, 24.67 in. She made the calculations automatically, adjusting her scope with minute precision. This shot would not just push the boundaries of ballistics, it would shatter them. At this distance, her bullet would take nearly 7 seconds to reach its target. 7 seconds during which anything could change. As the sun continued to rise behind her, Emily Wilson placed her finger on the trigger and exhaled. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. Through her scope, she watched as the first Taliban commander crumpled. Before the others could react, she had taken down 3 more key fighters with mechanical precision. The Taliban forces, suddenly leaderless, scattered in confusion. In the valley below, Reynolds and his men watched in stunned silence as their attackers fell one by one. The sound of distant rifle fire reaching them seconds after each impact. "What the hell is happening?" the comms specialist whispered. "Someone's watching over us," Reynolds replied, equally mystified. "And they're one hell of a shot." The impossible shot had just saved 12 American lives. Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 3 months later. The armory was a sanctuary of ordered silence. The rhythmic hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the faint scent of gun oil and metal, the precise rows of weaponry in their racks. It created a world apart from the chaos beyond these walls. and that was exactly how Staff Sergeant Emily Wilson preferred it. She sat at a workbench in the far corner, her focus entirely on the disassembled M2010 enhanced sniper rifle laid out before her. Bolt, receiver, barrel, magazine, stock, all arranged in perfect alignment. Each component gleamed under the harsh light, testament to hours of meticulous cleaning and care. Wilson moved with practiced precision, her hands steady as she inspected the bolt face for carbon buildup. She dabbed a small amount of oil onto a cloth and ran it along the bolt surface, checking for any imperfection that might compromise accuracy. To an observer, it might have appeared as simple maintenance. To Wilson, it was meditation. At 35, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found their purpose early and pursued it relentlessly. Her service record spoke volumes. Distinguished markswoman in the United States Marine Corps, 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, 18 confirmed kills at distances exceeding 1,500 meters. Now an instructor at Fort Bragg's Advanced Marksmanship Unit, she was respected by her peers, at least most of them. The armory door swung open, breaking the silence. Wilson didn't look up. The heavy footfalls and boisterous voice told her everything she needed to know. Well, would you look at that? Little Miss Perfect is polishing her toys again. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hayes stood in the doorway, flanked by 3 other instructors. At 62, Hayes was an imposing figure, 6'3", broad-shouldered, with close-cropped gray hair, and the weathered face of a man who had spent too many years in harsh environments. His 25 years as a Navy SEAL had earned him a certain swagger that seemed to fill whatever room he entered. Wilson continued her work, acting as if she hadn't heard. This was a familiar routine. You know, Hayes continued, stepping into the room, I sometimes wonder why we even let women handle these weapons, especially the long-range systems. It's not just about pulling a trigger. There's physics involved, complex calculations. The men behind him chuckled on cue. And then there's the physical aspect, hauling gear through rough terrain for days, remaining absolutely still for hours. Not exactly suited to the fairer sex, is it? Wilson aligned the bolt with the receiver, sliding it home with a satisfying click. She still didn't look up. Her silence was not timidity. It was control. Hayes wanted a reaction. He wouldn't get one. Hey, I'm talking to you, Wilson. Hayes's voice hardened as he approached her workbench. The least you could do is acknowledge your superior officer. Finally, Wilson raised her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. Is there something you need, Colonel Hayes? I'm in the middle of maintenance. Just making conversation, sharing some professional observations. He leaned against her workbench, deliberately invading her space. Tell me, what's the longest confirmed kill you've made in the field? Not on a range with perfect conditions. In combat. 1,748 meters. Helmand Province, 2010. Hayes raised an eyebrow, genuine surprise flickering across his features before he masked it. Impressive for a woman, but let's be honest. You've never had to make the really hard calls, the kinds of shots that separate the legends from the lucky. He turned to his audience. Gentlemen, did I ever tell you about the time in Fallujah when I had to take out a high-value target through a sandstorm at 2,000 meters, with wind speeds exceeding 30 millimeters? Had to calculate bullet drift like solving a damn calculus problem. The men nodded appreciatively, though none seemed particularly impressed. Hayes's stories grew taller with each telling. The point is, he continued, turning back to Wilson, there's a reason why all the record holders for long-distance kills are men. When it comes to the extreme edge of what's possible, women simply don't have what it takes. Biologically, psychologically, it's just science. Wilson reassembled the rifle's scope mount, tightening each screw with precise torque. Her face remained impassive, but her knuckles had whitened slightly around the torque wrench. With all due respect, sir, she said quietly, Science also said humans couldn't break the 4-minute mile until Roger Bannister did it. Hayes's expression darkened. Cute analogy, but this isn't track and field. This is warfare. Lives depend on the shooter's abilities. And I wouldn't trust a female sniper with any shot over 1,000 meters in actual combat conditions. The stress, the pressure, it's too much. He was building towards something, Wilson realized. This wasn't just the usual harassment. Hayes had an agenda today. In fact, he continued, his voice rising so the entire armory could hear, I'd bet my entire month's pay that you couldn't hit a target at 2,000 meters in variable conditions, not with all the training in the world. The challenge hung in the air. Several other armorers and instructors had paused their work, watching the confrontation unfold. Wilson felt their eyes on her, some curious, some sympathetic, others clearly aligned with Hayes's view. Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. What about 3,127 meters? The room went completely still. All heads turned toward the armory entrance. Master Sergeant James Blackwood stood in the doorway, his weathered frame silhouetted against the light from the hallway. At 68, Blackwood was a living legend in military circles, one of the original phantom snipers who had operated along the East-West German border during the height of the Cold War. His exploits were classified, spoken of only in whispers among those with the highest security clearances. Blackwood moved into the room with the deliberate ease of a man who had nothing to prove to anyone. His face was a topographical map of experience, deep lines etched around piercing blue eyes that had seen more than most could imagine. A faint scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, a souvenir from an operation no one dared ask about. Master Sergeant Blackwood? Hayes straightened immediately, his tone shifting to one of deference. Blackwood's reputation demanded it. We weren't expecting you until next week. Blackwood ignored him, walking directly to Wilson's workbench. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze assessing but not judgmental. I asked a question, Blackwood said, his voice carrying the slight gravel of age and too many cigarettes. 3,827 meters. Could you hit it? The room remained silent. Everyone present understood the significance of that number. The current world record for the longest confirmed sniper kill was just over 3,500 meters. What Blackwood was suggesting went beyond record-breaking. It approached the impossible. Wilson met the old sniper's gaze. She sensed this wasn't a taunt or a trap. It was a genuine question. With the right conditions and equipment, she said carefully, anything is theoretically possible. Blackwood's weathered face remained unreadable. That's not what I asked. I didn't ask if it's possible in theory. I asked if you could do it. Wilson considered her answer carefully. Bravado would be as inappropriate as false modesty. I don't know, she said finally. No one does until they try. A ghost of a smile touched Blackwood's lips. Good answer. Hayes stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with being sidelined. With all due respect, Master Sergeant, we're discussing realistic combat scenarios, not theoretical extremes. The practical limit for effective sniping is around 2,000 meters, even with the best equipment. Blackwood didn't even glance at Hayes. His focus remained entirely on Wilson. Finish your maintenance, then meet me at the officers' mess in an hour. It wasn't a request. With that, he turned and left the armory, his departure as abrupt as his arrival. In his wake, Hayes's face had flushed dark red. Don't let that old man fill your head with fantasies, Wilson. He's been out of active service for decades. Things have changed. Wilson returned to reassembling her rifle, her movements as precise as before. But something had shifted inside her. Blackwood's question had awakened something, a curiosity, a hunger she thought she'd buried years ago. Colonel Hayes, she said, looking up at him, what exactly are you afraid of? The question caught him off guard. For a moment, genuine surprise flashed across his face before hardening into anger. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, his entourage trailing behind him. Wilson finished reassembling the rifle, her mind already racing with calculations and possibilities. 3,127 meters, almost 4 kilometers. Was it even possible? An hour later, Wilson found Blackwood sitting alone at a corner table in the officer's mess, nursing a cup of black coffee. The lunch rush had ended, leaving the space relatively quiet. Blackwood gestured to the chair across from him. "Your reputation precedes you, Sergeant Wilson," Blackwood said as she sat down. "They call you the ghost behind your back. Did you know that?" Wilson didn't respond. Nicknames meant nothing to her. "They say you never miss, that you can calculate windage adjustments in your head faster than a computer, that you once took out 3 targets in under 40 seconds at varying distances without adjusting your scope." "People exaggerate," Wilson replied, keeping her voice neutral. Blackwood studied her for a moment. "Maybe, but your record doesn't lie. 18 confirmed kills at extreme distances, top scores in every marksmanship course you've ever taken. And yet I'm still just an instructor, not in the field where I belong," Wilson finished for him. "Is that where this is going?" "Where do you think it's going?" Blackwood asked, his blue eyes sharp despite his age. Wilson decided to cut through the verbal sparring. "Why did you ask me about 3,127 meters? That's beyond any confirmed kill in military history." Blackwood smiled slightly. "Not officially confirmed, perhaps." He took a sip of his coffee, letting the implication hang in the air. "Tell me about Montana." The abrupt change of subject caught Wilson off guard. "What about it?" "That's where you grew up, isn't it? Your father was a hunting guide in the Bitterroot Mountains. Taught you to shoot when you were, what, 8 years old?" Wilson's eyes narrowed. "You've read my file." "I've read more than your file," Blackwood said. "I know your father was Army Rangers, served in Grenada, received a Purple Heart and a Silver Star for actions that remain partially classified, died in a hunting accident when you were 17. Wilson felt a cold tightness in her chest. Few people knew those details. "What exactly do you want from me, Master Sergeant?" Blackwood leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What if I told you the hunting accident wasn't an accident?" The world seemed to still around Wilson. The ambient noise of the mess hall faded away. "What are you saying?" "Not here." Blackwood glanced around, then slid a small key across the table. "Training Building C, room 237. 1 hour. Come alone." He stood, nodded once, and walked away, leaving his coffee half finished. Wilson sat motionless, staring at the key. Her mind raced through memories of her father, his patient instruction as he taught her to shoot, his quiet pride when she hit her first target at 500 yards, his final words to her as he lay in a hospital bed, blood seeping through bandages from what everyone called a tragic hunting accident. "Promise me, Ashley, promise me you'll become the best. No matter what they tell you, no matter who stands in your way, you have a gift. Don't let anyone take it from you." She had attributed his intensity to the pain medication, the trauma of the accident. But what if there had been more to it? Building C was one of the older structures on base, used primarily for specialized classroom training. At exactly 1400 hours, Wilson unlocked room 237 and stepped inside. The windows had been covered with blackout material, and the only illumination came from a projector displaying a series of images on the far wall. Blackwood stood beside the projector, his face half illuminated by its glow. Another man sat at a desk near the front of the room. Colonel William Harrington, the base commander. His presence surprised Wilson. Whatever this was, it had high-level authorization. "Close the door, Sergeant," Harrington said, his tone formal. "What you're about to hear is classified top secret. It does not leave this room." Wilson closed the door and moved to stand at parade rest before the two men. "At ease, Wilson," Blackwood said. "Have a seat." She sat in the nearest chair, eyes drawn to the projected image, a satellite photograph of what appeared to be a remote mountain range. "Tell me what you know about Project Olympus," Blackwood said, watching her reaction carefully. Wilson shook her head. "Nothing, sir. Never heard of it." "Good, because officially it doesn't exist." Blackwood clicked to the next slide, a technical diagram of what looked like an advanced sniper rifle system. In 1981, at the height of the Cold War, DARPA began a classified program to develop extreme long-range precision targeting capabilities. The goal was to create a system and train operators capable of eliminating high-value targets at distances previously considered impossible. Another click, another image. This one showing a much younger Blackwood in specialized cold weather gear, holding a rifle unlike any Wilson had seen before. "I was one of the first test subjects," Blackwood continued. "We operated primarily along the East German border, conducting operations that remain classified to this day. The program had limited success. We achieved confirmed kills at ranges up to 2,700 meters, revolutionary for that time. But then something happened." His expression darkened as he changed to the next slide. The image showed an older man, perhaps in his late 50s, with steel gray hair and cold eyes that seemed to pierce through the photograph. "This is Ivan Sokolov, former KGB, later FSB. During the Cold War, he was their foremost sniper and sniper instructor. We have confirmation of at least 32 kills attributed to him personally at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. In 1989, intelligence suggested he had been killed during an operation in Berlin." Harrington spoke up. "But recent intelligence indicates Sokolov is very much alive, and he's training a new generation of long-range specialists for a non-state actor we've been tracking." Wilson studied the image of Sokolov. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though she was certain she had never seen him before. "What does this have to do with me?" she asked. Blackwood exchanged a glance with Harrington, who nodded slightly. "We're reactivating Project Olympus," Blackwood said, "with new technology, new methodologies. But we need the right operator, someone with exceptional natural talent, mathematical aptitude, and psychological resilience. Your name came up repeatedly in our search." Wilson's mind was racing. "And the 3,127 meters you mentioned earlier, that's the operational requirement?" "Our intelligence indicates Sokolov has developed a methodology for accurate firing at ranges approaching 4 kilometers," Harrington said bluntly. "We need to match and exceed that capability." "With all due respect, sir, that's beyond the physical limitations of ballistics," Wilson said. "At that distance, you're dealing with the Coriolis effect, atmospheric refraction, and bullet drop measured in dozens of meters, not to mention the 7-second flight time during which any number of variables could change." Blackwood smiled faintly. "And yet, you've already calculated all of that, haven't you? In your head just now?" Wilson didn't deny it. She had always had an intuitive grasp of ballistic mathematics. It was like music to her, a natural harmony of numbers and physical forces. "If anyone can do it, you can," Blackwood said simply. "But there's a complication." "Hayes," Wilson guessed. Harrington nodded. "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes has considerable political influence. He's been vocal in his opposition to women in certain combat roles, particularly special operations. He's also been designated as the security liaison for Project Olympus due to his SEAL background. He'll do everything in his power to see you fail," Blackwood added, "and he has allies throughout the chain of command." Wilson processed this information. "Why tell me about my father? What does he have to do with this?" Blackwood's expression grew grave. "Your father wasn't just Rangers. After Grenada, he was recruited into a specialized intelligence unit. During the late 1980s, he was part of an operation tracking Sokolov's activities in Western Europe." Wilson felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. All these years she had believed her father was simply a decorated ranger who had returned to civilian life to raise his daughter in Montana after her mother died. The idea that he had been involved in covert operations changed everything and explained the fragments of memory that had never quite made sense to her. Are you saying Sokolov killed my father 15 years after the Cold War ended? Blackwood hesitated. We don't have definitive proof, but the circumstances of your father's death match Sokolov's methodology. A single shot from extreme long range, made to look like an accident, no shell casing ever found. And your father had recently contacted his former handler, claiming he had information about active Cold War operatives who had gone off-grid. The room seemed to close in around Wilson. Her father's last words took on new meaning. He hadn't been delirious from pain medication. He had been trying to tell her something. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "Whatever this Project Olympus entails, I'm in." Harrington studied her with a calculating gaze. "This isn't about personal vendetta, Sergeant. The mission requires absolute emotional control." "With respect, sir, that's exactly what you'll get from me," Wilson replied. "I don't operate on emotion. I never have." Blackwood nodded approvingly. "Before we proceed, we need to assess your current capabilities under stress. Tomorrow morning, 0600 at the long-range facility. Hayes will be there as an official observer. He's expecting a standard qualification exercise." "But it won't be standard, will it?" Wilson asked. "No," Blackwood confirmed. "It will be a test of your limits, and more importantly, a test of how you handle Hayes's inevitable attempts to undermine you." The following morning dawned clear and cold, with a stiff breeze that would challenge even experienced marksmen. Wilson arrived at the long-range facility 15 minutes early, her personal gear meticulously prepared. The range stretched out before her, target positions marked at intervals from 300 meters to the maximum visual range of just over 2,000 meters. Hayes was already there, surrounded by a group of senior instructors and range officers. His expression darkened when he saw Wilson. "Sergeant Wilson," he called out, his voice carrying across the empty range. "So good of you to join us. I was just explaining to these gentlemen that today's exercise will demonstrate the practical limitations of female operators in extreme conditions." Wilson ignored the bait, focusing instead on unpacking her equipment. She had brought her personal weapon, an M2010 she had modified extensively over the years. Every component was familiar to her, adjusted to her specifications through thousands of hours of practice and field use. Hayes approached, hands clasped behind his back. "I've taken the liberty of modifying the course of fire," he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. "Instead of the standard qualification targets, you'll be engaging reactive steel at extended ranges. Wind conditions are challenging today." "What a shame." "Thank you for your concern, Colonel," Wilson replied evenly, continuing her preparations. Blackwood arrived moments later, accompanied by Colonel Harrington and a woman Wilson didn't recognize, a civilian judging by her clothing, with the alert, analytical gaze of a scientist. "Master Sergeant Colonel Harrington," Hayes acknowledged stiffly. "I wasn't aware you would be observing today." "Just keeping my finger on the pulse of our training programs, Colonel," Harrington replied smoothly. "And this is Dr. Catherine Chen from DARPA. She's evaluating our long-range capabilities for a research paper." Chen offered a polite nod but said nothing. Wilson suspected her role was far more significant than Hayes was being told. The range officer called the course of fire standard qualification first, targets at 300, 600, 800, and 1,000 meters. Wilson executed flawlessly, hitting each target center mass with mechanical precision. Hayes watched with poorly concealed displeasure. "Not bad, Sergeant," he conceded when she finished, "but anyone can hit stationary targets in controlled conditions. Let's see how you handle something more dynamic." He nodded to the range officer, who spoke into his radio. Moments later, a series of moving targets appeared at the 1,200-meter mark. Small steel plates mounted on a track system, moving laterally at varying speeds. 10 targets, Hayes explained. 10 rounds. Time limit 30 seconds. Standard qualification requires 7 hits. Expert qualification requires 9. Wilson nodded and took her position again. The challenge was significant. Calculating lead for moving targets at this distance required split-second mathematics, adjusting for both bullet flight time and target movement speed. "Begin," the range officer called. Wilson's world narrowed to her scope. Breath control, trigger squeeze, follow-through. The familiar rhythm of precision marksmanship took over. Each shot was its own universe of calculation and execution. 10 shots, 10 distinct metallic rings as bullets found their targets. Perfect score. 26 seconds. A murmur ran through the observing officers. Even Hayes looked momentarily taken aback before his expression hardened again. "Impressive," he admitted grudgingly, "but let's see how you handle true long-range work. Set up at firing position Alpha." Position Alpha was situated on an elevated platform that provided a clear line of sight to the furthest targets. Steel plates positioned at 500, 1,750, and the maximum range of 2,000 meters. At these distances, every variable became exponentially more significant. Wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure, even the Earth's rotation had to be accounted for. 3 targets, Hayes announced. 3 rounds, no time limit, but you must declare your shot before firing. He smiled thinly. "And to make things interesting, I'll be adjusting the environmental conditions between shots." Wilson understood what he meant. The range was equipped with industrial fans that could simulate varying wind conditions. By changing these between shots, Hayes could force her to recalculate entirely for each target. She took her position, going through her mental checklist. Current wind, 8 mph gusting to 12 from her 4 o'clock. Temperature, 48 tortish. Humidity, 62%. Barometric pressure, 30.12 nhg. Distance to first target, 2,500 meters. Wilson made her adjustments, dialing into her scope with precise movements. "Ready on target 1, she declared. "Send it," the range officer responded. "Inhale, half exhale, pause, squeeze." The rifle's report echoed across the range. 1.8 seconds later, the steel plate rang out as the bullet found its mark dead center. "Hit," the spotter confirmed. Hayes immediately activated the wind system, cranking it to maximum. Powerful fans created a crosswind that bent the range flags horizontally. "Whenever you're ready for target 2, Sergeant," he said, unable to keep the smugness from his voice. "Wind's picking up a bit," Wilson recalculated. The wind was now approximately 25 miles from her 3 o'clock, a brutal crosswind that would push her bullet several meters off course at the 117,750-meter distance of the second target. She dialed her scope adjustments with careful precision. "Ready on target 2, she declared. "Send it," the range officer called. Wilson fired, compensating slightly for a last-second gust. The bullet sailed down range, fighting against the powerful crosswind for nearly 3 seconds before striking the steel plate with a sharp ping. "Hit," the spotter confirmed, a note of surprise in his voice. Hayes's jaw tightened. Without a word, he adjusted not only the wind system but also activated the range's environmental controls. Temperature regulators began pumping heated air across the range, creating a mirage effect, heat waves that would distort her view through the scope and complicate her ability to judge distance accurately. "Final target," Hayes said. 2,000 meters, maximum range for this facility. Wind and temperature conditions variable. Wilson knew what he was doing. By creating unstable, shifting conditions, he was introducing elements that couldn't be precisely calculated. This wasn't just a test of marksmanship, it was a test of adaptability and instinct. She studied the conditions carefully. The wind was shifting between 15 and 30 mph, changing direction subtly. The temperature difference between her position and the target was creating a pronounced mirage effect. These were the kinds of conditions that separated theoretical knowledge from true mastery. Wilson made her initial adjustments, then paused, watching the mirage through her scope. There was a pattern to the chaos, a rhythm to the changes that reminded her of something her father had taught her years ago. The wind has a voice, he had told her. Learn to listen to it, not just measure it. Feel its pattern. She closed her eyes briefly, focusing on the sensation of the wind against her skin, correlating it with what she had observed through the scope. When she opened her eyes again, she made one final, subtle adjustment. "Ready on target 3, she declared. "Send it," the range officer responded. Wilson squeezed the trigger, the rifle bucking against her shoulder. The shot echoed across the range, followed by nearly 4 seconds of tense silence. "Hit," the spotter announced, a clear note of awe in his voice. "Center mass." A stunned silence fell over the range. Even Hayes seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "Congratulations, Sergeant Wilson," Blackwood said. "That was exceptional shooting." "Lucky shot," Hayes muttered, though not quite quietly enough. Wind probably changed in her favor at the last second. "Is that so?" Blackwood asked mildly. "Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the proper technique, Colonel?" Hayes's face flushed. "I don't need to prove myself on a range." "Of course not," Blackwood agreed, his tone deliberately neutral. "Few of us could match what we've just witnessed." He turned to Harrington and Chen. "I believe we've seen enough to make our assessment." Harrington nodded. "Wilson, report to my office at 1400 hours. We have matters to discuss." He glanced at Hayes. "You as well, Colonel." As the group dispersed, Hayes approached Wilson, his voice low and threatening. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this isn't over. Blackwood may think you're special, but I know better. When it comes to real combat conditions, theory and range performance mean nothing." Wilson met his gaze steadily. "Is there something specific you're afraid of, Colonel? Or is it just change in general that frightens you?" His eyes narrowed. "Watch yourself, Sergeant. Accidents happen in this line of work, even to so-called naturals." Before Wilson could respond, Blackwood appeared at her side. "Problem, Colonel?" Hayes straightened. "No problem, Master Sergeant. Just offering some professional advice." "How generous of you," Blackwood replied dryly. "If you're finished, I need a moment with Sergeant Wilson." Hayes stalked away, the rigid set of his shoulders betraying his anger. "He'll be trouble," Blackwood said quietly once Hayes was out of earshot. "More than you realize. He has connections in places that matter, and he genuinely believes women have no place in special operations." "He's not the first man to underestimate me," Wilson replied. "He won't be the last." Blackwood studied her for a moment. "No, I don't imagine he will be." He gestured toward the mountains visible in the distance. "Tell me, what do you think about 3,127 meters now?" "Still impossible." Wilson considered the question seriously. "With standard equipment and conventional training?" "Yes, still impossible. But you wouldn't have asked if there wasn't something more to Project Olympus." "Indeed," Blackwood almost smiled. "Report to Harrington as ordered. Pack for desert conditions." He paused, his expression grave. "And Wilson, trust no one. Not even me. Not completely." The warning sent a chill through her. "Because of Sokolov?" "Because of what Olympus truly is," Blackwood answered cryptically. "This isn't just about a long-range shot or a rogue former KGB operative. It's about changing the nature of warfare itself." The Nevada desert stretched before Wilson like an alien landscape. Endless waves of sand and rock beneath a sky so vast and blue it seemed unreal. After the confined spaces of Fort Bragg, the sheer emptiness was disorienting. Heat rippled from the ground, creating mirages that danced on the horizon. In the distance, jagged mountains rose against the sky, their peaks sharp as broken teeth. Wilson stood on the tarmac of the small airfield where the military transport had deposited her and 4 others. The sun beat down mercilessly, already pushing the temperature past 90 degrees despite the early hour. No visible markings indicated where they were. No signs, no flags, nothing to suggest this facility existed on any official map. Just a small collection of low buildings shimmering in the distance, surrounded by a perimeter fence topped with razor wire. "Welcome to nowhere," a voice said beside her. Wilson turned to find Dr. Chen shielding her eyes against the glare. Unlike the others, Chen wore civilian clothes, khaki pants and a light button-up shirt that seemed incongruously formal for the desert setting. "Is that the official designation?" Wilson asked. Chen almost smiled. "Officially, this place doesn't exist. The land is listed as a weapons testing range, restricted access. What happens here stays classified at levels most Pentagon officials don't know about." A military Humvee approached, dust billowing behind it. It pulled up alongside the small group, and a man in desert camouflage stepped out. Captain Michael Roberts was in his late 40s, with the lean, hard look of someone who spent most of his life in harsh conditions. Deep lines framed his eyes, the mark of years squinting through scopes in bright environments. "Gear in the back," he called out, his voice carrying the slight drawl of the American Southwest. "We're on a schedule." As Wilson loaded her equipment into the vehicle, she noted Hayes standing apart from the group, speaking in low tones on a satellite phone. Their eyes met briefly, and his expression hardened before he turned away. Whatever game he was playing, it had followed them to Nevada. The ride to the facility took 20 minutes across rough terrain. No one spoke. Wilson used the time to observe her companions. Besides Chen and Hayes, there was Sergeant Daniel Miller, a weapons specialist she recognized from Fort Bragg. Though they had never worked together directly, she knew his reputation. Young, talented, but with a quiet intensity that some found unsettling. Captain Roberts drove with the casual confidence of someone who knew every inch of the terrain. Occasionally, he would glance in the rearview mirror, his gaze lingering on Wilson with what seemed like curiosity mixed with skepticism. As they approached the compound, Wilson noticed a series of range flags placed at intervals stretching far into the desert. They fluttered in the hot breeze, marking distances she could only estimate. The nearest appeared to be at standard range increments, 500 meters, 1,000 meters. But they continued far beyond, becoming tiny specks in the distance that must have been several kilometers away. Inside the main building was a stark contrast to the brutal desert outside. Cool, dim, and humming with technology. The walls were lined with monitors displaying weather data, ballistic calculations, and satellite imagery. At the center of the main room stood a large holographic display, currently showing a three-dimensional rendering of what appeared to be a custom rifle system. Blackwood was already there, deep in conversation with a man Wilson didn't recognize. When he saw the group enter, he broke off and approached them. "Project Olympus officially begins now," he announced, gesturing toward the holographic display. For the next hour, Blackwood and Chen delivered a briefing that left Wilson's mind racing with possibilities and questions. Project Olympus wasn't merely about pushing the boundaries of long-range marksmanship. It was about redefining them entirely. Traditional ballistics suggests that effective targeting beyond 3,000 meters is virtually impossible, Chen explained, manipulating the holographic display to show bullet trajectories. Even with perfect conditions, the variables become too numerous and significant to calculate reliably. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in before continuing. But what if we could account for all of these variables in real time? What if we could create a system that constantly adjusts for changing conditions during the bullet's flight path? The hologram shifted to display a rifle unlike any Wilson had seen before, sleeker than traditional systems, with integrated computer components and a scope that looked more like something from a fighter jet than conventional optics. "This is the XM-2030 Advanced Precision Targeting System," Chen continued, "the culmination of 15 years of DARPA research. It incorporates microprocessor-controlled optics that constantly adjust based on real-time atmospheric data. The scope contains miniaturized lidar for precise distance measurement and wind mapping. So the rifle does all the work, Hayes scoffed. What's the point of the operator then? The system enhances the shooter's capabilities, Colonel, Chen countered coolly. It doesn't replace them. Even with all this technology, you still need someone who understands the fundamental physics, who can interpret the data correctly, and who possesses the physical discipline to execute the shot perfectly. Over the next 2 weeks, Wilson progressed rapidly with the XM2030, her natural talent amplified by the advanced technology. By the end of training, she was consistently hitting targets at 3,500 meters with 90% accuracy. On day 15 came the ultimate test, live fire at extreme range before high-ranking officials, including General Lawrence from the Strategic Capabilities Office. Wilson faced targets at 3,800, 3,900, and finally 4,000 meters, a distance that pushed against the very limits of ballistic possibility. Her final shot struck dead center. Even Hayes seemed momentarily taken aback. "Impressive shooting, Sergeant," acknowledged General Lawrence. "The system obviously works as advertised." As the officials departed, Hayes lingered. "Enjoy your moment, Wilson. But hitting steel plates in the desert isn't the same as taking out a living, breathing target who's actively trying not to be killed." "Is there a point to this, Colonel?" Wilson asked, her patience wearing thin. "Just reminding you that when the real test comes, and it will, all your fancy technology won't matter if you hesitate." Before Wilson could respond, a series of sharp cracks echoed across the desert. Not the report of a rifle, but something else, the distinctive sound of incoming fire. "Sniper!" Blackwood shouted, diving for cover. Wilson dropped instinctively, scanning the distant ridge lines for the source of the attack. Through the dust kicked up by bullets striking around them, she caught a glimpse of movement. Approximately 2,000 meters away, a sniper team positioned on an overlooking ridge. "I've got them," she called out. "One shooter, one spotter, North Ridge, 2,100 meters." "Take the shot, Wilson," Hayes shouted. She lined up the shot, but as she peered through the scope, something made her hesitate. The positioning, the technique, it was familiar. Too familiar. "Something's wrong," she said. "The shooter's using Russian-made equipment, but the positioning is pure U.S. Marine Corps doctrine. No Russian or mercenary would use that approach." Instead of firing, Wilson stood up and waved her arms. "Hold fire! Friendly position!" The shooting stopped immediately. Hayes's face had gone pale. "You knew," Wilson realized. "This was a test. Your test." Hayes confirmed it was a live-fire stress assessment, authorized by General Lawrence. "We needed to know if you would hesitate under genuine threat conditions." "I didn't hesitate," Wilson countered. "I recognized the inconsistency. It was obviously a setup." That evening, Blackwood revealed his suspicions. Project Olympus isn't just about long-range targeting capability. There's another application, something called Project Helios. The next morning, Chen approached Wilson privately. "Meet me in Lab 7, 20 minutes. Come alone." In the isolated Lab 7, Chen activated a holographic display. What appeared was not a rifle, but something far more disturbing, a satellite platform equipped with a directed energy weapon. "This is Project Helios," Chen explained. "Tungsten rods launched from orbit, guided with unprecedented precision using the XM2030's targeting technology. No explosive payload needed. At terminal velocity, the kinetic energy creates impact equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon, but with no radiation. The ultimate sniper platform," Wilson said quietly. "Invisible, untraceable, unstoppable. Capable of striking any target on Earth within minutes, with accuracy measured in centimeters," Chen confirmed. "The XM2030 program was partially a cover, partially a testing ground. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the compound. Security breach. The facility erupted in chaos as an unknown force attacked with military precision. Security personnel moved toward defensive positions, research staff being escorted to shelter areas. Wilson, together with Miller and Roberts, fought their way to the command center, only to find Blackwood critically wounded. "Wilson, listen carefully," Blackwood gasped. "This isn't what it seems. Sokolov isn't. Trust no one. The real enemy is—" His words faded as he lost consciousness. Hayes ordered Wilson to help him reach the secure server room, claiming critical data needed protection. Once there, Wilson noticed something odd. "That's not standard emergency protocol. The purge should have triggered automatically when the attack began." "The EMP disrupted the automated systems," Hayes claimed. "The EMP that somehow affected communications but left these servers untouched." Wilson raised her weapon. "Who are you really working for?" Hayes's professional mask fell away. "You're even better than we expected, Wilson. But then, your father was exceptional too." "What do you know about my father?" "He wasn't just tracking Sokolov. He was working with him until he decided the operation had gone too far." Hayes smiled thinly. "Why do you think Sokolov let you live after killing your father?" "He saw potential in you." Before Wilson could respond, Miller burst in. "Attackers converging on this position." In the ensuing firefight, Wilson and Miller escaped through maintenance corridors. They met Chen, wounded but alive, who revealed another shocking truth. "Your father wasn't tracking Sokolov. He was his handler, codename Artemis. He ran Operation Looking Glass, exchange of personnel between American and Russian intelligence. So when my father died, he wasn't killed because he was tracking Sokolov," Wilson realized. "He was killed because he discovered elements within both intelligence communities were continuing the program for unauthorized purposes." "The legacy protocol," Chen confirmed. "Hayes was your father's protege who betrayed him." As they fled the compound through an underground tunnel, they emerged into the open desert only to discover they were being pursued by Hayes. Taking cover behind rock formations, Wilson found herself in an impossible standoff when Miller suddenly turned his weapon on her. "Stand down, Wilson," Miller ordered. "This is bigger than any of us." "Your legacy protocol." "The world needs stability," Miller insisted. "Hayes is the real traitor. He lost his nerve, just like your father." In that moment, Wilson understood the extent of the deception. Whatever Hayes's agenda, Miller was the immediate threat. Moving with explosive suddenness, Wilson took down Miller. But another threat emerged. The medic Peterson held Chen at gunpoint. In the chaos that followed, Wilson made a split-second decision, managing to escape with Hayes in pursuit. They reached an abandoned mine in Death Valley where, to Wilson's shock, she came face to face with Ivan Sokolov himself. "You have your father's eyes," Sokolov said. Sokolov revealed the truth, showing Wilson a photo of himself with her father. "Your father wasn't just my colleague. He was my friend, my brother in all but blood." Operation Looking Glass wasn't just an exchange program. It was a firewall, a joint American-Russian initiative to ensure neither side could develop certain technologies without the other knowing. We were the guardians against our own government's worst impulses. Then why did my father die? Because he discovered the legacy protocol, a plan to create weapon systems beyond governmental oversight. The night before he planned to expose it, I warned him they were coming. He refused extraction to protect you first. A gunshot interrupted them. They found Hayes standing over Chen's body. "The world is changing, Wilson," Hayes said. "The legacy protocol understands what your father never could, that true security comes from strength, from control. Through an orbital weapons platform controlled by unelected operatives," Wilson said. "That's not security, it's tyranny." "You can be part of this, Emily," Hayes offered. "Help shape a safer world." Wilson thought of her father's teachings about responsibility and certainty. Her movement was so fluid that Hayes never saw it coming. The bullet struck him center mass. "Your father would be proud," Sokolov said quietly. Wilson secured Hayes's weapon and discovered his tactical data drive, insurance containing evidence of the entire legacy protocol network. As military helicopters approached, Wilson reflected on her journey from Fort Bragg to this moment of truth. The ultimate test of a sniper wasn't technical skill or steady hands. It was judgment, knowing when to take the shot, when to hold, and which target truly mattered. 3 days later, Wilson sat beside Blackwood's hospital bed. "They've confirmed it. The data on Hayes's drive exposed the entire network. The legacy protocol is being dismantled. Project Helios has been terminated. Jack would be proud of you, Wilson, not just for your shooting." Wilson smiled. "For my judgment." "Exactly. So what's next for the woman who made the impossible shot?" Wilson looked out the window at the distant mountains. "I think it's time to teach others what I know, to make sure there are always people who understand that with great skill comes great responsibility." "The best snipers aren't just shooters," Blackwood agreed. "They're guardians, watching from a distance, making the hard calls, standing between order and chaos. Just like my father did, just like your father did, and just like you will." As she left the hospital, Wilson felt a sense of closure that had eluded her for 15 years. The truth hadn't simplified her father's memory. It had transformed him from simply a loving father into a man of principle who had given his life to protect the world from a threat few would ever know existed. Now that legacy had passed to her, the daughter who had inherited not just his aim, but his courage, his judgment, and his unwavering moral compass. The shot at 3,127 meters had been just the beginning.